I just want to start with my name. My name's Pekhna Kaur, and I use she, her pronouns. I am an expressive arts therapist. I am working as a psychotherapist. What I offer is one-on-one psychotherapy and a lot of interest with group work. I'm working with individuals who struggle with addictions or caregivers who struggle with addictions. I have my own experience through immigration, and I appreciate offering support around people who are struggling with that. Or getting a sense of their identity as they're immigrating, moving countries, moving spaces, no matter if it's a choice of immigration or they're here due to other reasons. What else? That's a little bit of what I enjoy to do. Yeah, that's a little bit of me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, and I'm so excited to have you on the team. So, a little bit about us and about me. My name is Risha Dave, and I am the founder of Risha Dave Psychotherapy. And we now have a clinic with a pretty big team, I would say, a small team, but a pretty big team because now we get to offer so many different kinds of things. But our areas of focus do involve supporting folks from the South Asian diaspora and helping them navigate things like family conflict, people-pleasing tendencies, self-care, lack thereof. And so I'm really excited to have you on because one of the biggest things, right, is lived experience when we talk about cultural competency and there's only so much reading you can do to really be feel like competent and attuned to the culture. And that's where I think that lived experience is like so important and so helpful. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. I do have a few questions, and we'll just get started.
All right, I'm excited.
So, what are some unexpected grief responses that people experience when they're leaving the home that they grew up in?
What are some unexpected grief responses that people experience when they're leaving home? Um, I think the first thought that's coming to my mind is what I spoke about earlier, being a sense of firstly, has your displacement or immigration happened due to reasons which is a chosen immigration, or is it a situation wherein you've had to leave your space due to other reasons of safety or unsafety? So I think that is that's the first thought that's coming to my mind, and the impact of either of them would be so different. It's interesting that the question you asked is unexpected grief responses, being that there's some sense of understanding that we have that we're missing home or we're
Mm.
feeling lonely or having to navigate like a cultural difference. Let me share something from my own experience, which I was telling you the other day
Yes.
about.
Yes.
So this is one thing that I was sharing with you, Risha, when every time this is such a small piece, but I've always had that phase of transition that I have to be, that makes me realize how gentle I have to be with myself during that time. When I go to India, where it's such a collectivist
Hmm.
space. I live with a few generations. I live in the same house with them or have folks around. And there's a sense of routine that the house holds. There's a sense of groove. There's a sense of energy. There's a sense of just container or holding that the house provides. I know when I get up in the morning, my grandparents are going to have their routine, whatever they're going to be doing. I know there's going to be, my mother's going to be cooking food. There's something that's going to happen. But as soon as I make my way here, there's like one house and there's me. And there's a
Yeah.
sense of emptiness and building of not just like making my own food or doing my cleaning, but even building of that whole routine, of that whole
Mm.
energy of the whole house. That really takes some time. And
Mm.
really is the transition. There is, of course, when I come back, I say things like I miss home or I'm homesick and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But I think it's smaller pieces like these and I have that perfectionist part which can go like, okay, you gotta do this. You gotta like, come
Hmm.
on, you're back, like get into groove, get things going. But I have to really remind myself to be gentle, because it takes that time to make that switch. You're suddenly doing a lot of things on your own, which were held by a collectivist space in India. So that's like an unexpected thing that I've started noticing in like the past little time as I've gone home. Yeah, that's like one thing that's coming to my mind.
Yeah, and I wonder if like unexpected grief really just comes with how intense the grief can be when you move to a different country. And I really appreciate you mentioning that it really depends on if it's a chosen immigration or not, because that will, that comes with a whole different set of issues that might be coming up. Um, I know that, or I can anticipate that you would, or someone who does immigrate to a new country will miss the culture, especially if we're considering, moving from India, let's say, to Canada. It's very different. The other piece I hear a lot is like, it's cold here. And like, I don't think people are always ready for how cold our winters are, which also just adds to the isolation because not a lot of people are out during this time. Not a lot of people are doing a lot of things. We're hibernating a lot. I'm curious about how that also might be affecting folks who move here.
100%.
Hmm.
100%. I'm almost like, as you were talking, like an image that I'm having is there's almost like a retuning that you're doing because India, for example, like other countries that people immigrate or might immigrate from, has a very tropical weather like situation. Like even if it's a place where you're experiencing some sort of a winter and some sort of a summer, there's still not as much as an extreme. There's still more sunlight. There's up down to my body level. It's tuned
Hmm.
in a way that works for that. And then suddenly you're here where there's not sunlight.
Hmm.
Get up in the morning. It's such a strong thing when I have to get up in the morning and turn the light on.
Yeah.
It really stays with me and so the image that came to me was there's a retuning that really takes
Hmm.
a while. It takes a few years, a few
Mm.
winters, those cycles that you really get a sense of how to have your body and your emotional space kind of tune and work with this.
Mm.
I think what you bring up is so important. I had one more thing that just came to my mind as you were talking with that unexpected pieces of grief. I think one of the things which sometimes is unexpected is when, um, again, going back to that idea that India is collectivistic or India has so much, we have so much of like small joys and celebrations,
Yeah.
festivals,
Yeah.
things. And when you're in India, sometimes I've been like cribbing about it or complaining about it. But when you're here, you can have those small moments of like people having a dinner together. Or right now, I'm
Mm.
hearing a lot of my Muslim friends talk about that if there's Ramadan and they're here, it's not even about like Eid or it's not the celebration. It's just that everyone's together. It's
Yeah.
everyone's having that ritual of taking out that time and having those conversations and
Mhm.
spending time, all of that, it really sometimes hits you in ways that you did not, and it can be
Mhm.
a wave. You're just going through your day and suddenly it's, I don't know, Rakhi, and you're just like, so it's such a heavy sense of loss
Yeah.
that can sometimes be a wave that you're not ready for, but it.
Hmm. Hmm. And then there's a time difference, right?
Hmm.
So everybody's already celebrating without you.
Yes.
Yeah. 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 Thank you for sharing. Hmm. Yeah. And I'm curious, why is moving out such an emotionally complex experience, especially for those from collectivist cultures?
Mhm. I mean, we've spoken about a few of the things. Uh, there is so much, and I might be kind of focusing on my experience as a South Asian or Indian person, but there is, firstly, there's so much of everything, as I spoke earlier, everything that happens in a together sense, which also has its own sense of like suffocations in a way that
Yeah.
they're trying to run away from. But there is this sense of individualism that we kind of have also not been trained for. Like,
Mm.
again,
Yes.
going back to my own example,
Yeah.
own lived experience. I, I grew up in a space, or I've seen folks around me grow up in space, not really being taught the skills of adult life,
Mm.
which suddenly I'm here and I'm having to apply.
Yeah.
There was a possibility that if I was there, there was some adult skills that I just like basic as cooking. Maybe
Mhm.
I wouldn't have
Well,
to
because
do.
you have hired help mostly.
Yes.
Why would you learn, right?
Or taking care of small things like changing a bulb or like
Mm, hmm.
small things, and suddenly you're here and you're having to take on those pieces, learn all of those things of adult life. And then also there's a lot of frustration around that. You're having to
Yeah.
through that.
Hmm.
That feels like a big shift as well.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. That is one piece that I think about a lot, about how
Hmm.
I am an adult myself today, or how folks are adults themselves, but we've not been, I call it in a way as I've not been trained for the exam that I'm giving. I
Mm.
haven't been trained.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm giving
It's
the
like a
exam.
pop quiz though.
Yes.
Yeah.
So another piece that I really think of is this piece around um, there's been always a sense of, and of course it leans on the idea of white supremacy. There's been a sense of just anything that's white being better than
Yeah.
what yeah,
Yeah.
what the songs, the way they dress,
Mm.
and it was always a them. There was always a foreigner. That's
Mm.
terminology that's used so much. And that whole process of growing up in that society, the internalized racism, the internalized sense of inferiority that's been there forever, how that really surfaces when you come here. Because
Yeah.
still being in India, still being in another country wherein you still hold those soft parts
Mm.
of yourself, they can be hidden because we're not face to face with.
Hmm.
We're not, we're
It's just
that's
the norm.
just the norm.
Mm.
Really coming here, even being sometimes even like for me to transition into just talking in English, for example,
Yeah.
and my accent, what do I
Hmm.
do? Do I adapt it? Am I not? Like, what do I do with that piece?
Mm.
I think all of that also like really surfaces a lot of insecurities, which we've always had, but just they could be hidden there. They just surface up here. So that's also definitely one big challenge that I notice.
Mm. Hmm. I
Yeah.
also wonder, like, as we talk about not knowing how to do certain things, like adulting, right? Like our adulting looks very different in India.
Yeah.
And I think about like my own family, for example, who might be visiting from India. I grew up here. I was born here, so I don't have the same experiences as maybe you would. But I see it from when my family comes and visits, right? And when they don't have the help here to just make it like cha in the morning or paratha in the morning, right? Like it just seems like they're kind of lost, right? Like they're not really sure what to do, how to go about it. But then I also notice that, and this is more specific to my family, and I wonder if other people could actually relate to this too, that anything that any uncertainty ends up falling on the woman of the household.
Okay.
So we don't have hired help to do cha or to make cha today, so then you must be in charge of this. And so that's just something that I can relate to in terms of having visitors here. But I'm wondering how it might even affect people who move here, like young families, young married couples who move here, who maybe are not used to that at all. And now both folks need to be working or are at school. And
Hmm.
that sounds like such a big thing, right? To get used to and to manage and navigate.
Oh, that's such a beautiful point that you touched on. It's like the system over there of patriarchy worked, no matter whatever the struggles were there, but it worked in a way of like the contract between the man and the woman being in a certain way in a
Yeah.
heterosexual cisgendered
Yeah.
marriage, being
Yeah.
such that these are the roles. And then suddenly you
Mm.
come here wherein there's slight shifts in the role, like the woman has to work because we gotta make
Mm.
money. So then, but then does that impact the other roles of her being the caretaker, sole caretaker of the house or not?
Mm.
What is the impact of all of that? So those
Yeah.
are like subtle pieces that again I said that need to be worked on, but also like the misalignment, the discomfort around that can also itself cause frustration.
Mhm.
I do, as a man, have expectation that you should be making food for me, but the woman to feel like I am also earning, should I? And those conversation navigations is hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
They're
I,
new.
yeah,
It's all just so new. Hmm.
that is definitely an interesting piece over there as well.
Mm.
In its home
And I
place.
feel like we're maybe touching on this already. So I'm gonna just go ahead and ask this question, right? How does moving out challenge someone's sense of self and their identity?
Mm-hmm. Uh, the first thought that's coming to my mind again goes back to what I think what we spoke about earlier being the reasons for those moving out. Because I know if it's an experience of someone who's leaving a country because they're fearing being persecuted just because they're queer, for example, that is such a sense of landing for them being here because
Yeah.
there's on that versus someone who primarily leans more on speaking more of their local language versus English, and landing here and having an experience of having to navigate so much of space that requires us to speak that language. It's so complex, this question, depending.
Mm-hmm.
And so complex is our identity as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even
It just goes back to, I want to tie it back to when we talked about unexpected grief, and
uh,
you mentioned chosen immigration.
mhm.
So I think that, like, I think that's where you're going, right? That, like, is this a chosen thing that they're moving out and moving to a different country? And or have they been, do they feel like they've been forced to do that because they weren't accepted,
Totally,
or that they didn't feel like they belonged?
totally, totally.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think in totality, like there's a sense of a little bit of belonging and not a little bit of belonging in this place. And I, even for myself, often think about as a person who speaks the way she speaks, looks the way she looks, um, has perspectives because of the way I have, how much do I assimilate here and how much do I hold on to who I am? Like,
Hmm.
what is that? What is the movement between that? Like, even
Yeah.
if I think about like my language, how much of it does, like, how much do the R's roll? How much do
Hmm.
the T's cross?
Yeah.
I always think about that for myself. And to be very honest, as an immigrant, my R started ruling more as a necessity because people could not understand when I said something.
Hmm.
It happened to that, and it felt like okay, I need to assimilate. That is what's needed.
Hmm.
So it's so complex around those pieces around identity. But what I really appreciate, and this is like me tying just this conversation to the work that we do, is providing that space to break
Yes.
down those pieces of identity of how much we want to pick up and what we want to pick up and what makes us us and
Mhm.
what do we want to leave and all of those pieces.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Like in terms of what we want to pick up, right? Or what have we picked up
Yes.
due to maybe survival or people pleasing, and people pleasing can be tied into that survival mechanism as well. But how much of our identity is maybe created because we felt like we had to be something to either feel like we belong or actually to fit in, because there's a difference between belonging and fitting in. Um, how much of it was like survival?
Yes.
How much of it is like what we just kind of see and pick up because it feels like, okay, like maybe this is how we're expected to act or
Totally.
behave or speak,
Yeah. Yeah.
and whether or not you actually even want to keep those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, you've picked it up, but you can let it go too. And what
Absolutely.
might that look like for you?
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Just you even talking about that gets this exciting feeling inside of me because
Yeah.
and I love that aspect of that privilege of that we
Hmm.
can provide that space and even for provide that space for myself to be able to
Hmm.
do that to be such a privilege. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I guess I'm curious too, how do you navigate struggles that come up in adulthood that you have not been trained for? So, you mentioned cooking, for example, or like even cleaning for yourself. And then how do you cope through that process of like learning and unlearning those pieces as well?
Yeah. Um, I think I've come to there is just this switch that used to happen with me earlier, wherein going back home in whatever sense that meant to me where I grew up felt like vacation or where felt like relaxing or it just felt like a place that I get nourished and fed. And then as soon as I come back here, it's like go, 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 go. Like
Oh
it
my
always felt.
gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the rat race.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to make this deadline. We got to do this. We got to do that. Like your phone should be on after 6. You should be answering emails at any time of day. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the first thing that I started to notice, that I really need to start like giving myself grace over there, because
Mm,
it took a while for me to transition really through that.
mm,
And I think there's a lot of pieces of adulting that I spoke about earlier as well, that the shifts of who I am as an adult in India versus coming back here. And
mm,
I started to give myself grace over there. I think that's been one of the ways. Um, it's also been an interesting experience of unlearning. Like for example, there was something about um, and in some senses, I'm speaking about more than my household, but
mm,
I'm referencing my house. There was a sense of cleanliness
mm,
or a sense of order that used to always be there in the house. I've given that up for myself, not cleaning, being up to the most.
mm.
And I also realized how much I held on to that as a
Yeah.
sense of identity. I hear my mom saying so many times, like I can hear her voice is saying, clean the cupboard because if someone comes, what would they say? As if they're going to come to
Yes.
the cupboard.
As if somebody's actually going to go through the cupboards. Exactly. They don't go through the cupboards. They sit down and ask for what they need from the cupboard.
They're going to come and check. What if someone comes home? That was
Hmm.
constantly something that went on.
Yeah.
Um, I do recognize that my mom's this is me kind of going into another tangent, but I know like she had an identity with the house
Oh
that
my
she was
gosh,
tied
yes.
to, which made sense. And I've kind of tried to I did internalize that just growing up in and around her. And I think that's one thing that I'm trying to shed or distance or
Mm.
rewrite for myself. As a way of coping through adulting in a way that looks so different from my mother's adulting or my
Yeah.
yeah, it's been small unlearnings like that, but a
Yeah.
lot of grace because I feel like there's a lot of frustration in this process. Again, going back to what I said earlier, that I'm writing an exam that I wasn't prepared for,
Mm.
given any material for,
Mhm.
and it's frustrating. That's like the first thing that comes up for me.
Yeah,
So, uh,
absolutely. And when we think about like our moms, for example, and like what it meant to have a clean home, I really think that a lot of folks felt like their identity and their worth
yes,
was tied to a clean home, to a presentable home, to a presentable outfit, to a presentable whatever it was, like, wearing lipstick in the house, like, okay, I love that for you. And who is it for? Is it for you or because you're afraid that somebody's going to come in and see you?
yes,
Hmm.
100.
And I'm always thinking about how, like, I did not grow up around women who just sat down and relaxed. It was always something. It's always something. And
Yeah,
I'm so curious about like that the internalized message there, right? That we have to be constantly doing something in order to be worthy or be
100%.
accepted.
Yes,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
completely agree with you.
Yeah. And so what I hear, like, it's again, it sounds confusing because you go to India, you visit home, it feels good, it feels relaxing. And then coming here, it's like you're just in that go, go, go space, like survival.
Mm.
And to some degree, like our parents, and I keep thinking about like, and I say our as in very generally speaking, like our parents in India or like our elders in India don't know how to relax.
They don't. That is
Which
true.
is so wild because so much is actually done for them.
And yet,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, I hear you.
Mm.
I'm almost like asking myself this question, is there a piece of like the women, I'm not even just talking about my mother, but
Yeah,
just the women in my families
yeah.
that I've seen always been doing some things. And also just to highlight that they're often not credited for the doing. It's
Mm.
just it's just
No.
like
It's expected.
it's expected and it's given. They're always on their feet, like
Oh
just
my gosh, yeah.
always on their feet.
Yeah.
And that's not considered a big thing. That's like uh yeah, that's I'm almost imagining for myself, is there a piece of that that I bring back when I come here?
Mm.
When I go there, there is the women, there is my mother, they're there to take care of me. And hence I can
Mhm.
retrieve into another role of just like
Yeah.
receiving that in a way.
Yeah.
And then when I come here, I feel like that urgency that this is a house and I'm the woman and I need to take on some role of theirs.
Yeah.
I'm actually questioning that for myself.
Yeah. And this is where therapy can be super cool and helpful because you
True.
get to explore those things. I also want to ask you, right? Like, because you keep mentioning grace. For
Hmm.
someone who might not know how to give themselves grace or like even know anything about like how to be kind to themselves or like self-compassionate, how did you learn to do that?
It's such a great question. And I'm so appreciative of you breaking that down because sometimes I notice myself saying things. Um, but I know that I was at this place where it didn't make sense until it's almost like what I say is actionable steps. Unless that is there, I know the next step and then I can like do something about it. Uh, I think uh, there was a point when I started realizing that I want to do a lot of things, but also I don't have the energy to do a lot of things. So first thing was like just noticing, like just taking the example of the transition, also the rest I spoke about. Whenever I used to come back, I realized that I want to like do everything. I want the house clean. I want to get back on workout. I want to cook
Oh my
all of
gosh,
the
yeah.
meals. I want to get back into my work full time. I want to sleep on time. I also want to read. Like I want to do everything. I don't know, suddenly this used to happen. And as I started to realize that there was such a fight between this part of me, which is like you have to do everything, and this part that just can't. I
Yeah.
just so I would go into this space of just being
Mm-hmm.
like not doing anything at all. I
Mm-hmm.
started saying these words to myself, which was that, you know what, I'll just come back and I'm going to allow myself to, like, maybe I did one day, I did my routine, and the second day I would be like, I'm just going to allow myself to just be.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say that today it doesn't feel that good, and maybe I need to just sulk today, and I just need to sit on the couch and sulk. And and I would use this terminology specifically and say these words to myself that I am giving myself permission to sulk for today.
Mm.
And it was almost like an informal contract that I used to make with
Yeah.
myself.
I love it.
Um, I did try to also hold this idea that I am going to come back tomorrow and do what I need to do, or try my best to do what I can. But at least for today, can that criticizing part of me just be a little bit away, and can I just sulk for today, and that's fine. It would give me a little bit more space. That felt like
Yeah.
grace, like just allowing. I am
Mm-hmm.
allowing myself. I am giving myself permission to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the experience of grace for me. Yeah.
Mm. I love that. And I am very similar to you where I'm like, I need to do all of these things. Like, I want to do all of these things. And then I had to look back and think, like, reflect and be like, why do I want to do all these things? And it tends to come back to this feeling of like, what I'm already doing is not enough.
Hmm.
And that I need to be doing more to become this like amazing version of myself because the version that I currently am is not enough, which is like just not true. There is no truth to that. And I'm all for improving yourself or like self-development or personal development. I'm all for it. And like it doesn't have to be all done in one day. And being, like just being is so important for our health. And that's kind of what gave me that permission or like that allowed me to even give myself permission to just be is like this is part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think finding your own lived understanding of what it means to just be is
Mm.
is like that nourishing aspect of my human existence. That feels like such a heavy sentence.
Mm.
But what I mean by that is for me, just being is making art. Like it really is
Yeah.
that. Um, if I know that if I'm scrolling on the phone for a very long time, which I do pretty often,
Mm.
it's coming from a space of survival. And I know that's something that I'm trying to run away from. But if I'm sitting and making art, there's a sense of just
Oh my
being.
gosh, yes.
And there's of course I've had my own relationship with the arts, and there's a lot
Mm.
there as well. keeping that aside, when I'm really doing something for doing it, it really nourishes me. And that is the piece um of self-care, of I don't know, of nourishment to and what I call like the human experience.
Mm,
It means to be human, to just be. I think I heard this somewhere, or maybe I had my own therapist say this to me, that we're human beings and not human doings.
yes.
Don't do, just be.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I hold on to. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And as an expressive arts therapist, are you able to provide that space for your clients?
yes.
I love it.
That is again such a joy. My belief stems from the space that we're all creative beings.
Mm,
There's no doubt we're all engaging in creative experience every day,
mm,
no matter what it is. And there's a lot of like almost like when you get a cut and it heals on
yeah.
its own, because the body has that power or that possibility of doing that. The creative
Mm,
experience has that for us. There's so much, everything that's around us is through the creative experience. We've built something because of that, and
mm,
have that as for a quote unquote healing power. So
mhm.
yeah, I
And
love
do
that.
you think that like your clients need to be an artist
Oh,
to know?
oh, I love that question.
Yeah.
Always. An artist, how can I do that? That question is such a beautiful question as a starting point of getting to explore your self-critical voice through art making as well. Because even before we stepped into it, the self-critical voice was like, I can't do that. I'm not an artist. There's an idea of an artist. They're a painter, or they're really good, or they have to be in a gallery, and I can't do that. So I'm just not going to engage in this. So even the question is such a
Oh
great
my
step
gosh.
into the process, and
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.